Hello, welcome to the Margarita Rise Up with Margarita show. I'm Margarita, and I'm here to help you rise up into your next level of leadership as a spiritually conscious entrepreneur. Many of you are light workers, starseeds, empaths, and I'm here to help you rise up into that next level. And so if we haven't met yet, my name is Margarita Alcantara, and I am an activator for the new code of power, the consciousness of oneness codes, and I help those leaders of light, those light workers, empaths, starseeds who are here to be spiritually conscious entrepreneurs, to help lead the light in the world and also shift the paradigm around power and awaken the planet. So the Rise Up with Margarita show, it's every Monday, and today's Monday, and it's always at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So welcome. And so I'm just going to let you know that every single time that we do have the show, it's always on a specific topic, and I always stay on topic. And so I know that some of you have some random questions, but we're going to really keep it on topic. So just letting you know about that. Today's topic is the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022. And so I'm going to share with you why it's so important to really be in your creation energy as a really powerful leader of light. So when you are here to create change in the world, and usually those people who gravitate to my work, to my lives, my social media content and all that, it's because they really feel that calling within themselves. And they're always at different levels of development, right? So some people are just waking up into the fact that they are spiritual beings. Some people are a lot more further down and have already garnered the wisdom and are in cultivation mode and maybe in mastery. And so this is something that I help my private clients with. Also just really helping to go from awakening into mastery, and really it's about being in the mastery. And part of being in your mastery is being very conscious about how you are creating in the world. And so just know that, and I say this often, you are always creating your reality at every given moment. Every moment of every day, you are creating your reality based on what you're deciding on, based on what you are experiencing on a conscious level. And so, the whole thing is, it's all about whatever you're creating in your consciousness and whatever your beliefs are, that is literally creating your reality. And that's why it's something so important to really step up into the beingness of your power and your light. And so part of that means being conscious with what you are creating. So here are the common ways spiritually conscious entrepreneurs manifest. So, and also why they don't work. So one thing is that they are calling it in from the universe, right? So one common fallacy, and I'll go into the details of why these methods are not so effective. But, one of these things that light workers tend to do is say, oh, I'll just call it in from the universe, right? So, but the reality is that that's only one part of the equation, and there's a lot of other steps that are required in order to actually manifest. You don't just simply, because a lot of light workers think, okay, I just say it to the universe and then I just wait, right? Like as if you order a Maserati and then you expect it to be in your driveway tomorrow, right? It's like there's actually some other steps that you get to implement in order to create, right? It's not a passive thing at all. And that's what a lot of light workers kind of miss the boat on, is thinking that it's just a passive thing where you just simply say it and then it just pops up in your energy field, right? And on one hand it does, because we are creating our holograms every single day. You and I, in fact, are meeting on a very specific hologram ourselves. But the thing is that is only one fraction of the equation. So I'll be sharing that a little bit with you in a little bit. Another common way spiritually conscious entrepreneurs manifest or try to manifest is that they push through based on what others are doing with whatever they're creating, whatever they're offering, whatever their services are. And that is also not a really good way to be manifesting, because you'll always be manifesting, but you always want to be manifesting the correct stuff, right? So another common way that spiritually conscious entrepreneurs manifest is that they approach it from the headspace instead of the heart. So they try to lead it with logic and having everything be reasonable and be logical and everything making linear sense. And that is a huge block for a lot of light workers. So, and I'll share that with you as to why. A fourth reason, a fourth common way, is waiting for inspiration to hit. So I see a lot of spiritual conscious entrepreneurs do this where they're like, well, I'll just wait for it to come. Like you'll just meditate on a rooftop somewhere or the top of a mountain somewhere, and then all of the inspiration will come eventually, right? Whether it be to create, and whether that means to create a new offer for your clients or new content for your community, or anything else in your life you want to be experiencing and creating, and including money and including aligned clients, and they think that you just wait for inspiration to hit, or you wait for things to settle down, or you wait until you're going to lose those 5 pounds, or you're going to wait until your children go to college, or you're going to wait, right? And then it'll all just magically pop in, right? And so I'm going to share with you why that doesn't work either. And then the fifth common way spiritually conscious entrepreneurs manifest is that they wait. Yeah. So it's kind of like what I was kind of segueing into, which is waiting for things to calm down or settle down in their life, and then they'll take action. So it's so important, right, to take note of this. It's so funny. Your Soul is Gold is saying, social media makes you believe that you can simply sit back and order the Maserati from the universe. I know, it's so true, because we're such an instant culture, and the fact that we are connecting on social media today is part of that. It's testament to that. And it's a really powerful tool if you know how to use it correctly, right? And that's one thing too, is that a lot of light workers who are spiritually conscious entrepreneurs, they just kind of slap things on a post, and they're like, okay, I call it a day. I showed up for my community, right? And there's so much more to it than that. And so I'm going to share now why these common ways of manifesting don't work for spiritually conscious entrepreneurs. So when I spoke about calling it into the universe, calling it in is just one aspect. It's simply a fraction of the rest of what you get to open into, right? And what is your plan, right? Because you can call it in, but what are you actually implementing? What are you taking action on? What are you connecting with within yourself to make it happen? Who are you shifting and becoming in order to make that come into your energy field, right? Because all of that is important. A lot of light workers, empaths, starseeds, they think, okay, I just think it into creation and then it just pops up tomorrow, or it just happens there in my lap, right? And it's also about how energy gets shifted. It also shows up in the reality, right? So this is how that also gets to align. When you call it in from the universe, what are you doing in your actions and your conscious creation on this earthly plane to back up that intention? Because that's really important. If you're not doing that, then you're missing the game there on the manifestation level. So that's really, really important, is like, what am I doing as my next step? What am I aligned with? What am I creating? And how am I making this happen? And who am I becoming to make this happen? Because it's one of those things where a lot of light workers, they'll be like, okay, I'm just going to keep saying it until it happens, right? But then they're not taking any action that is aligned towards that goal, or they're not shifting themselves on any level. And so it's kind of, I think it's the definition of insanity to do things the same way over and over and over and expect a different result, right? And that's the truth, is that in order for you to really go up into the next level, it's not about you talking a good game, right? Because I can do that too, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't actually implement it in your life, and then it reflects out in the rest of your life. Because here's an example of that. There are a lot of light workers, who will say, oh yes, I'm in my power already, right? As if there's a cap on being in your power. Because that's the number one mistake that people make, right? Is that they say, oh, I'm already in my power, I'm good, right? But true masters know that there's always a next level of mastery and opening and level to open into, right? But one thing that they do is that they actually just say, okay, well, I spoke it into the universe, and now I just wait. Now I just wait. And then all of a sudden, I'm a millionaire tomorrow, right? And it's like, well, are you believing it? Do you really believe you can be a millionaire? Do you like, I mean, number one, right? Because if you don't, you've already blocked your manifestation, right? Or if you are saying, yes, I believe that I can be a millionaire, and yet, everything in your life is not aligned with that. It's another thing. And here's the other thing about power. When you say you're in your power, but then everything in your life reflects otherwise, that's something to take note of. Because, sometimes I'll hear light workers say, oh yeah, I'm in my power and everything. And yet their relationships are not healthy, or they are barely making ends meet, or they're hardly paying their bills, or they're not bringing in any clients, right? Like these are indications that something is not working. And so if something is not working and it's either unhealthy or it's not aligned or it takes a lot of energy to implement, then, you know, it's going to reflect. It's going to reflect in all aspects of your life. So being in your power isn't just being like, ooh, I feel good today. I'm in my power, right? It's a lot more than feeling good to be in your power. It means that everything in your life is a reflection of you being in your power. And you are connected to your joy in all aspects of your life, right? So that's really what that's a part of. Jennifer says, amen. I couldn't have never opened up the new layers without your support. We don't have to do this alone. Yes, Jennifer, thank you. And she's such an amazing being. And she's also done some deep work with me in the past. And so, yeah, so that is one of those things, calling it into the universe. It does require aligned action that is big and pushes you out of your comfort zone, because you can never go to the next level unless you actually become who you get to be in that next level. Another thing, pushing through based on what others are doing with their offers and their prices and their services. So anywhere where you're pushing to create anything, it should be a quick indication that something is off. Something is not right. Something is not aligned. Because not that it should be easy, because you will need to implement and apply yourself. I'm not saying that, right? But I'm saying that if you are pushing and you're getting a lot of obstacles and red flags coming up and all these things popping up, and you still keep pushing through it, consider that something is off. Consider that there's something that needs to be tweaked. And sometimes it's just a little tweak. Sometimes it's a whole revamp, right? But that awareness never happens until you connect with yourself around what this is really about. So I'm just checking my notes on this. And so the other piece around approaching it from the headspace and the thinking of the logic, and before I go into that, back on the topic of pushing through based on what others are doing. If you are going to create, whether it be your services, your social media content, any aspect of your life based on what someone else is doing, without creating cultivation of awareness of what you are here to experience and create in the world, then that'll be very difficult for you to manifest exactly what you want. And the reason why is because if you are using others as a reference point, you are not tapping in to yourself and with yourself, your own energy field, your own creation field, in order to create from that aspect, right? Which brings us into approaching it from the headspace, the thinking and the logic. So I've known a bunch of individuals who will say, oh yeah, like I'm really connected to my light, and but I really want to connect with my third eye and my higher consciousness. And then at the same time, they're very married to things needing to be logical, things needing to make sense, things needing to be accurate and stringent and strict and white-knuckled and all this other stuff, right? I mean, just the energy of those words, you can probably feel how constricting and tight that feels, right? And the reason why is that when you come from that approach, from the head, from everything needing to be logical and linear and reasonable, then you will never reach your goal. And here's why. Because if you're stuck in the head and you're not creating from the heart at all, then you are missing out on the key component to your manifestation, because it all comes from the heart. And when used in conjunction with the third eye, not your thought, then it really creates something at the next level. But first and foremost, you must be connected to your heart and ideally activated in your heart. And that's something that I do for my clients, really activating them into their heart power and their divine power and love codes and all those different kinds of codes, right? So when you then shift into a heart-centered consciousness versus a thinking and pushing through, then things just come from alignment. You just create from what's easy, and I'm seeing a comment here, create from the heart. Absolutely. That is how you create. You don't come from the head, and you don't come from thinking it through and pushing it through. It's really much more than that. And there's a difference between being in your head and pushing through versus being in your higher consciousness awareness. There's a whole difference there. Like the thinking and the thought, that actually comes from fear. And the worrying, that comes from fear. Worrying, we think that we're creating something, and we are, but it's not what we think we're making, right? Because we think, oh, if we're worrying about it, we're putting our mind on it. And the reality is that what you're creating when you're worrying about something is, more fear, because worry is just really a fear of the unknown. And so approaching it from the headspace, thinking and logic, when you shift that into dropping into the heart frequency, into the heart energy, and really speaking from that heart space, then you can really emit that frequency, and you're literally emitting a vibration, because that's something that I've cultivated for many years. That's something I help my conscious power clients cultivate, and it really is a game changer, because if you shift from here to the heart and then operate from that heart creation, it is a whole different ballgame, and it doesn't feel like pushing. It's actually very accelerated, and it's very smooth, and it's actually very quick. So once you transmute that, it becomes this whole thing of thinking and lodging and waiting into quick shifting. And the other thing too about coming in from the headspace of thinking and the logic is that you will actually block your third eye power if that is your criteria. And so that's very important. So waiting for inspiration to hit was the fourth piece of the way spiritually conscious entrepreneurs commonly manifest. And so waiting for inspiration to hit, inspiration comes from making a decision to apply, right? Because that's when all of that alignment comes through. And so what I mean by that is, back in the day when I used to write a lot more blogs, like I'll still write some blogs here and there, but it's not as often as I used to, which was every 2 weeks. And so that was like, I don't know, maybe like 9 years ago or so. And because I'm a writer, I figured out my way of doing that. And so one way is to just simply, on this specific day, and for me it was a Tuesday at around like 6 or 7 p.m., I would sit down and I would write my blog, no matter what was going on that day. And because a lot of light workers will be like, well, I had a fight with my significant other, and so I put it off for the following day. And you could totally do that, right? But usually it'll be some other excuse as to why you can't write that day. And what it just comes down to is just deciding to do it. Right? Because it's not to say that I never had any fights with my significant other, before writing a blog post or doing a live or doing a masterclass or a webinar, or, I didn't get some disappointing news before any important situation that I'm going live for, right? That's happened numerous times. And I still show up, right? Because if I'm waiting for the inspiration to hit, or if I'm waiting for all the things to settle down, shit won't get done. It just doesn't. Because there will always be something. And the mastery comes in, okay, in this moment, what am I going to choose? In this moment, am I going to choose to have a meltdown because of whatever news? Or am I going to address it after I do my webinar? Or after, I do this event, right? And it's not about ignoring your feelings. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying is that when you come from a place of service and alignment and really true deep creation within yourself, and you've already worked out those kinks around the bigger triggers and your fears and the scarcity mindset and all these things, and you really shifted, then you're opening up this portal of energy so that then you can create and then you can just keep going, right? And so this is really important, is to really make that decision. Because if I put off writing a blog, or if single time like I was about to write a chapter in my chakra healing book, that, something were to pop up, or I didn't make dinner that night, or, something else, right? There will always be something. And it's a matter of, in that moment, what are you choosing? And it's in those moments that you create your reality. And so it's all based on a decision that you are prioritizing. And so that's really, really important to keep in mind. As Lisa was reiterating, in this moment, what am I going to choose? Absolutely. Jennifer is sharing, working with you was by far the greatest investment of 2020. Thank you for always showing up for you first. Deep love and gratitude. So much love to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. That's so sweet. I really appreciate that. And then the last piece around the common ways and why it doesn't work. So waiting for things to calm down or settle in your life and then taking action. So your powerful purpose in this world doesn't come because you waited for it. It doesn't come because you waited for things to settle down, for you to lose the 5 pounds, for you to wait for your children to go to college, for you to move to another house, for things to settle down and feel more balanced and have more money and have more time, right? Honestly, those are all excuses. They just really are. Because when you're really truly tapped in to the connectedness of your being, you are simply unlimited. Time cannot contain you. Money just flows from you, right? Your wonderful, amazing clients, they just find you because you're also applying yourself, right? You're putting yourself out there on social media or doing whatever aligned things to connect with your audience. And, things open up when you make that decision. Because, if you're waiting for that perfect time to come, you'll be waiting a long ass time, because that perfect time will never come. The perfect time is the perfect time that you choose. And let me just say that one more time. Your perfect time is when you choose it to be the perfect time. And it was really interesting. There was something this one woman had mentioned. One of her things that she said, because she gets this question, because she's this millionaire and she helps other people become millionaires, right? And she said, I became a millionaire when I decided to become a millionaire. And that was such a powerful quote to me, because it's really about how much you are allowing yourself to believe about yourself in this moment, because that can really become very much the be all end all when you are creating. If you don't believe that it can happen, then you're done, right? Because you can say, I'm in my power till the cows come home, but if you don't believe it in yourself, if there's some part in your being, somewhere in your heart that's unhealed, that doesn't believe that can happen for you, or you don't think you can be the supernova starseed and just really be one with the universe, or maybe you just say, oh yeah, I'm one with the universe, but then you don't believe it, right? Or something, or the way you're showing up in the world reflects that you don't believe in it, right? If you say, oh yeah, I'm one with the world, but then you're talking about division and breaking down all these things, right? Then you are actually speaking and uncollaborated. You're not collaborated with your energy and what you want to manifest, and you're not in alignment. Yeah. Okay. Diana is mentioning, I'm connecting, but it is true. Procrastinating has been part of my life that became so addictive. Yeah. And procrastination, it comes in other forms, right? Like it comes in forms of, let me do more research. Let me look that up. Let me feel into it. Let me wait until I trust my body. Let me wait until I trust my partner. Let me wait until. That is not true research. You're not truly researching. You're not truly waiting. You're procrastinating, right? And procrastination happens whenever you're hesitating or you're delaying something. And I did a post on this, I think it was even yesterday, about exactly that. So I love that you brought it up. Thank you for mentioning that, because it's pretty common. It's pretty common. Okay. Yeah. And the reality is that it's not about research. Research is just another way of saying you don't believe in yourself, right? Because, yeah, you can get your certifications. You can, hold on, I'm going to grab some water. Because research, you don't need to research. I mean, you can get certifications, you can get degrees, you can go into programs, and all of those are important. But if you just believe that you're going to research until you're ready to show up, or you're going to wait until something else pops up before you show up, whether it be on social media, for your clients, for your community, whatever it is, then again, you're going to be waiting a long ass time. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Eva. They're saying hello on Facebook. I'm appreciating that. I'm doing a simulcast on Facebook and Instagram like I always do. And so here's the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022. And you've heard me use this word a couple times just a few minutes ago, and that is alignment. Alignment. Because if you are not aligned with all the things you're calling into the universe, if you're not aligned with what you want to create, if you're not aligned with what you're setting out to do, nothing works. Nothing you do will work. Because if it's not aligned, you're going to be pushing and pushing and pushing, and it will feel like pushing, which is the more excruciating part. You're going to feel how hard it is. Because when it's hard, so there's a difference here, right? When something is hard to do, sometimes it's just a tweak, and it's about you becoming that next version of yourself to then catapult forward, right? But most of the time when it feels hard and it feels heavy and it feels like, oh my God, I'm just trying to move through the next step, right? When it's like that, something is off. That is your first warning sign. Something is off. And immediately check yourself. Immediately come to mind of your consciousness and your heart. Is this aligned for me? Just remove yourself from the situation for a moment and just touch base with your heart and just be really honest with yourself, because no one's going to be judging you here, just accept yourself, right? Hopefully you won't. But you just touch in with your heart and you say, is this aligned for me right now? Because sometimes what is aligned in one moment is no longer aligned in the given moment, and you get to be quick about it. And that's why trusting your intuition is so important. So that's really, really important. So here's why alignment works and why. So first of all, it connects you with your higher self and your future self, which are two different things, right? I saw someone confuse the two before, when I talked about my future self, they were like, oh yeah, I talk to my higher self all the time. It's like two different things, right? Higher self, that higher aspect version of yourself that's proximal to source, God, Great Spirit, universe, however you want to call it. Future self is that version of you who's already accomplished what you are setting out to do right now. Like whatever your vision is right now, there's that version of you who maybe she has that Maserati, right? Maybe, she has a number of clients or a certain level of programs that are filled, or she wants to live in Costa Rica, or I don't know, So whatever that version that is of your ultimate goal, that ultimate creation, she's already accomplished it. And so connecting with that version of her is something that's really super important. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. I see Diana mentioning something that is really also relevant, because I think that I've seen this before, so this is good to speak on. I'm feeling like one with the universe, but the biggest reason why I'm procrastinating is because I want to heal my connection with my loved ones that takes so long, but I'm ready to be one. So the reality is that there's so many versions of yourself, right? Like the version of you that is watching this live right now is only one aspect of your being. Like just digest that for a moment. That's only one aspect of your being. That version of you who's on this live right now. Or checking it out on replay, right? but there are infinite aspects of you beyond time and space on different layers of existence, on different planes, on different earths even, and in even different timelines. So, I'm not going to go too deep into that because that's not the topic of today, right? But this is all a part of the creation field, all these different layers, because you think that connecting with your heart is like, that's the simplistic, perfect way to go into it, right? But even in your heart, there are layers and layers and zones and, other platforms there, right? But, it's this aspect of connecting your spiritual with your earth plane. And this is something, again, I mentioned with my clients. I explore this with my clients. It's just really about balancing these aspects, right? Because you can have the type of relationships that you want. And sure, there are some connections that you get to heal. Some of them may not get healed, at least in this lifetime. It all depends, right? But there's an aspect of you that can still be in connection to your oneness, And as long as you're connected with that, that's a whole other ball game. And you're actually, that's a whole other level of mastery too. So connecting with your higher self and your future self about what you're being called forward to create from a place of alignment, right? So connecting with your future self, and this is something that you can just like drop into your heart and cultivate within yourself in a moment of stillness, if you like, where you just really get connected with that version of yourself who has all those things that you want right now and that you're setting out to do right now. Like literally all the steps you're doing right now is towards this greater creation that you've already manifested. Another version of you has already manifested already. And then your higher self, of course, has that connection to that higher aspect of you and what you're here to create and, all those versions of you you've ever been and all that goodness, right? So making sure you're connecting, and one of the best ways to connect is through meditation. And I did this reel that kind of went a little viral over the weekend about meditation. And, like I always do that purposely because I know that some people, whether it be polarizing, right? Because that's one of the things I brought up in yesterday's reel is to be polarizing, not for the sake of being polarizing, but I'm saying that when you're truly taking a stand, sometimes you will be polarizing, especially if you are a light worker who's here as a spiritually conscious entrepreneur. So, connecting with all those aspects of yourself and doing that from that place of mindfulness and alignment. Number 2, taking big, aligned, inspired action that lines up with that vision and that you've never done before, that is scary and the next step. So again, this is all about alignment, and that's how you get to powerfully create. The number one way you get to powerfully create in this lifetime. So yes, it's about taking the big aligned action. So if you were to connect from your heart with what's aligned for you in terms of your purpose and what's next for you, then that next step from that place of alignment, how does that get to look like? Who do you get to be to make that happen? Does that require a different version of yourself? Does that require you to do something that you haven't done before? Most likely that's a yes. Because whenever you're taking a step up, it requires you to shift into something greater, and that comes in the form of awareness first. So that was number 2, taking big aligned action that lines up with your vision that you've never done before, that is scary, and the next step. Number 3, doing the inner work to get curious about anything you may have carried over from your previous year that no longer serves you, or even lifetimes for that matter. Find out what the wisdom it carries so you can clear, heal, and release it and make room for what it does. For what does, should I say. And so this is so important for alignment, because when you're truly connecting with that aligned aspect of yourself and that future version of who you are, and you're connecting with okay, who do I get to be? What's aligned? What's not aligned? Then what will actually immediately happen if you're doing this right is that all of the things that are not aligned are going to start just falling away. Like they're just going to start falling away. Like all the things like, oh, like that, I don't want to do that. That's not aligned for me. Or these relationships are not aligned with me. Like things are going to shift. Once you make the decision things will shift in your earthly realm. That's how the spirit and earth realms work together. So if you're one of those light workers who like, yeah, I'll deal with the earthly realm when I'm done with my spiritual stuff, right? Or I'll deal with my spiritual stuff when I'm done with my earthly stuff, such as, once I'm done paying the bills, then I'll worry about being spiritual, right? And there's a belief there that they're separate. And if you're really an empowered light worker, spiritually conscious entrepreneur, a leader of light in this world, there's no wall between the two. In fact, there's a bridge between the 3D and the 5D. And we're actually more like closer to the 5D now because of where we're at in the trajectory of things. But that's really important to know, is that all these things that no longer serve you as you elevate and ascend and ascend, is not a punishment. Okay, first of all, do not look at it like that, because some light workers are like, oh my God, this is terrible, I don't want this to happen. But you do, right? Like your higher self, there's a version of you who said, this is what I want, this has not been aligned, I'm ready to release and let go of that, right? So if something is releasing and letting go, it's because you're ready and because you stepped up for that. So, allow yourself to embrace that. Allow yourself to embrace your choices. Okay, just moving through some comments here. Okay. Loving that. So those are the three things that work when it comes to creating from a place of alignment. I'll just mention them again. And as I do, if you have some questions, I can take some questions about this topic, about the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022 and anything that I've just brought up. I will answer questions around that. Okay, so just to recap, around the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022, alignment. And 3 ways that works is through connecting with your higher self and future self about what you're being called forward to create. Number 2, taking big aligned, inspired action that lines up with that vision and that you've never done before, that is a scary and next step. And number 3, doing the inner work to get curious about anything you may have carried over from your previous year or even previous lifetimes that no longer serve you. Find out the wisdom it carries so you can clear, heal, and release it and make room for what it does, right? Because it's not just simply about like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm carrying this thing, it's undesirable, just move it out, right? Look into the wisdom it's carrying, why it's coming up for you, learn from it, right? Garner the lesson from that experience, and then you can release, right? Because until you do that, you can't really release it, or it will not fully feel like closure for you. Okay, so any questions on this topic? Happiness is expanding says, love that. Future self is mostly like a sensation in the body. Excitement is like drop on alignment. Yes, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Wilson K is asking, how do you start to look inwards to learn, heal, and connect with yourself, to help connect with your future and higher self? Well, I mean, that just comes with the whole basic thing of doing that self-inquiry, right? Like, I mean, that's something that's given that you should be doing, like not just you personally, but just all of us should be doing, is just really having deep self-inquiry each day. Check in, because once you've chosen that place of alignment and all that stuff, I mean, it's a whole process, right? But then when you do, then you kind of come back, and sometimes you need to tweak. Sometimes, it's no longer energized and you need to spruce it back up again, right? But it all begins with the intention to connect with your heart from a place of alignment and your purpose from a place of alignment. So that's how it begins. And then a lot of the awareness starts to show up around that. And really doing that deeper work through self-inquiry about what's aligned, what isn't, Why are these things aligned? Why are these things not aligned? Garnering the lessons like I mentioned, and then doing that clearing work so that you can connect to that. Okay, I'm seeing some questions pop in here. Does the concept of giving and taking work for manifestation, like taking on another public service before manifesting something? If I understand your question correctly, I will say that, it can look like so many ways, and sometimes things are stepping stones, right? Usually these stepping stones will be more like brief, but sometimes, you might you might spend a season there before you actually get into the next levels, right? Which is totally fine. But usually when it comes to, I'm trying to also understand the question a little more. Concept of giving and taking. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the giving and taking on manifestation, but taking on another public service, but for manifesting something. Not sure, but as long as it's aligned, like that's the number one question you get to ask yourself. Is this aligned for me, right? Because it might be a stepping stone to your ultimate goal, or it can just be a distraction. But only you will know if you connect with your heart and come from a place of deeper inquiry. Okay. Someone's asking, what if I don't know who I am in either 3D or 5D? Well, then that's your path, right? You get to start inquiring, because if you're just still at that moment of who am I, then that's start going deeper into that, right? Like that's where you start getting curious and you start leaning into, yeah, okay, maybe the question is who am I? Then go into it. Lean into it. Spend, time just like even contemplating that question, I mean, I'm not going to go deep into that because that's a whole, this is not so much about that kind of experience. But that's where you get to do some deeper work. Would you mind expanding on not referencing others in your work and light work or purpose? How can I create a practice of creating from my heart and not referencing from others? So what I mean by that's a good question. So what I mean by that is when you're basically looking from either like, oh, this person is doing it, I'll do it like that too, right? And then that's what you do it like, and that's how you're basing your offers. If that's what you're doing, you need a coach because you should not be creating from that place, right? Because you should not be creating from a place of comparison, right? Because that's the whole thing. If you're comparing yourself to somebody and then you're referencing all their prices and all their services, I mean, and then if you're also even just copying that content, then that's like just out wrong, right? But it's about, are you feeling confident in your own offerings and your own services and what you're creating, right? So there's a difference between, like kind of taking on some additional support so that you can get that feedback and accelerate versus looking, constantly, oh, what are they doing? What are they doing? Oh yeah, like that looks good. I think I'll do that, right? Or they're pricing their thing at that price point, then I'll do that too, right? And that's the wrong way to do it, because when you're doing it that way, first of all, you don't know what the goals are of that person. You don't know their goals. You don't know what they want to accomplish. And yet you're doing the same thing that they're doing. And probably it's not the same because you're two different people, right? So that's what I mean, is that when you're doing it from a place of comparison, it's a whole other ballgame than receiving support so that you can accelerate. Okay. So conditional manifestation. Conditional manifestation, that sounds like this is what I want as long as, then you put a caveat in there, then you put conditions on the universe. And now you're micromanaging the universe, right? So I don't recommend that, because then you just put like a big block in your manifestation game. And so when you're truly open to the manifestation from a place of alignment, it looks like you're completely open to it, right? And you move forward with the trust. So instead of saying, I want this as long as it looks like this, right? That's conditional manifestation, which means you're saying, okay, God, do this as long as it looks like this, right? Which doesn't work. And God cannot be micromanaged. I know, it's some people would love to, but that's not how it works. And then unconditional manifestation, then that looks like I am open to all forms of love, right? Which includes money. Money is a form of love. Power is a form of love, right? So when you are truly open to all forms of love, that is just one way to say it in an unconditional kind of way, then you are truly open to all of that. You don't say, I'm open to love as long as it looks like that person down the street with the brown hair. And, that's when you're like micromanaging things. Okay. Someone is asking, I find I'm not in my power with content creation. Is it odd to not feel able to connect my lightworker purpose to the content I can channel? Well, there's obviously a blockage there, right? There's something that is blocking you from stepping in because there's no difference. As I mentioned before, your spiritual world and the earthly realm, when you're truly connected and in alignment, there's no difference. So there should be no separation between you being a channel and you creating content on social media, because it's just all the same, right? It's all a connection of your extension of your expression. Okay. So someone's asking, I felt like I had an expanded view of my gifts potential in early 2019 to 2020, and then I found out that I wasn't seeing as clear in 2021 to 2022. Is that normal, and what could I do to get realigned? Well, first of all, what I'm noticing there is that you're actually in the moment of realigning right now. Okay, because you're questioning, you're having some internal dialogue there around, okay, well, I wanted to expand into my gifts 2019 to 2020, and then now what I'm noticing is this, right? And so lean into that, because usually when something's popping up that is kind of throwing a wrench in things, it's good to get curious about that, because usually what that means is that there's some kind of trigger that's still waiting to be healed, right? And the trigger is, can sometimes even be an activation. It doesn't have to be a bad thing necessarily. So I hope that is helpful. Okay, I'm going to be wrapping things up in just a moment, but I will take one more question. And I'm seeing here, Tim is saying, I'm kind of torn between trying to help people create art or be entrepreneurial. Any suggestion how to prioritize? Kind of just don't have enough hours in the day. So whenever I hear that, or whenever I even hear that pop up in myself, I'm like, well, Oprah has the same amount of hours I do. Beyonce has the same amount of hours I do in a day, right? And so how would they address that? Or even better, how would my future self address this, right? So I would recommend, Tim, really doing some work with connecting with your future self, as well as your higher self, of course. But your future self, I feel, will really give you a lot more guidance around this question, because it's really about what is the next step, right? Because one piece that may help here is there's no difference between that aspect of yourself who's here to help people and to create art and to be entrepreneurial. It's all there. It's all connected, right? So, because I'm hearing the separation between all of that. Like, over here, I'm helping people. Over here, I'm being an entrepreneur. Over here, I'm being an artist, right? It doesn't work that way. It's all connected. Your spiritual power and how you show up on the earthly realm. So, just to kind of illustrate how that might look like, is that if you are feeling kind of cut off somewhere between your spiritual aspect of you and your earthly aspect of you, that will often look like, at least for light workers who are not in their power yet, that will look a lot like feeling connected to source spirit, or being connected to being a channel or something like that, but then you're having a really tough time paying your bills. Like, that's just one of the more common ways to do it, right? Because if you're really in your power, then you're going to be able to pay your bills, right? Because there's no difference. It's all connected. So so for Tim, for you, I would say, first of all, take a look where you're seeing separation in all of these aspects, and then I would recommend connecting with your future version of yourself and ask him, okay, what does that next step look like? Like, I mean, this is what I want. What is that next step? Knowing that this version of yourself, Tim, has already accomplished that. He's already, whatever, living in the house, having the partner, whatever you're manifesting, right? Like, he's already doing that. He's already done that. He's already there. So he is who you get to connect to and get that wisdom from. Okay, everyone, really powerful, powerful questions. And I love that you're so engaged with this. And if you're just joining us now, just quick recap. Today's topic was the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022. And so we talked about the common ways spiritually conscious entrepreneurs manifest, why they don't always work, and then also the number one thing you need to know to powerfully create in 2022, which is alignment, and then how that works and why. And I shared the three things around that. So if you're just popping in now, make sure to check out the replay, and there will be a replay. There will be a copy of this live. In Instagram, it'll be on, I guess they just call it videos now in that tab. And on Facebook, it is in the videos tab. So next week, we are set to go for the next Rise Up with Margarita show on Monday the 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you join us there. Thank you so much for being here. It's so wonderful to see how involved you are in just really, like, how do I expand to that next level, right? Because we're all at different levels, and you get to go into the next version of yourself. Okay. Thank you so much for being here and showing up for yourself, because that's what you're really doing. And I will see you next week. And also, I will see you on social media. Okay. Have a great, loving, powerful week, everyone.